Episode 8 of Thursday Thoughts. So this episode's going to be a little bit different. So I've gotten some comments about how I went from being a truck mechanic to a heavy equipment mechanic, and then how did I go from a shop to a field mechanic. I've done my story before. I was on Certified Wrench Podcast, so I did an episode with him. If you guys haven't seen that or listened to that, I'll link his stuff down below. He did some videos and we did like a 2-hour episode. So I'm not going to go into that. So I was working, if you guys don't know my background, I was working at a concrete company. I worked at a couple different trucking companies. I was working at a Peterbilt International dealer. And they had kind of got slow, like they hadn't really laid off anybody, but it kind of got slow, leave early here and there. And so I was kind of like, I need to find something else. And I'd honestly kind of been getting bored of working on trucks anyway. I've been doing it for probably about 5 years at that point. Just kind of getting bored. It's kind of the same thing, just like, I'm kind of bored of trucks. Let me find something else. So the local cat dealer was hiring. They had like 5 open positions, a ton, which later I realized why, but at that point I didn't know. So I applied for a couple. And then I was talking to my father-in-law. He still works for the same company, but he's working for a construction company that did a lot of business with them. And he was like, hey, go talk to this guy after you apply. So that guy turned out to be the PSSR. So I was talking to him, and he got me to talk to the service manager. And then they were like, yeah, you're exactly what we're looking for, And they brought me in, like, they call it 70%. So you're basically 70% of a journeyman. You don't not know anything, but then you also don't know a lot of stuff. So that's how I got into being into heavy equipment. The good thing too is there's not a ton of like tooling difference between being a truck mechanic and being an equipment mechanic. Like there is different stuff, but like a lot of it's kind of the same, 3/4 stuff. The bigger stuff's kind of all the same. Yeah, there's like dealer specific tools, but I'm not counting that. But like tools that a mechanic would own, there's not a huge difference between the stuff you need. There was a couple, like I didn't have lineup bars and stuff like that, but nothing major that you need. So that's a good thing. So if you're already kind of doing on-highway trucks or heavy trucks, or even medium-duty trucks, like it's not that big of a step. And it's just, there's a lot more involved when you go to equipment. Just, there's electrical, which is kind of not the same, but electrical's kind of electrical, but like hydraulics and undercarriage and tracks and all that stuff, it's really, really cool. I like that huge thing. Like, I like that kind of stuff, there's so much more you work on when you work on equipment versus when you just work on trucks. So then how I went from being a shop mechanic to a field mechanic was I was at the John Deere dealer already. They had I said 3.5 field guys because they had 3 guys that had Kenworth big trucks, and they had 1 guy that had a 550, but the 550 was like a loop truck. It was set up for like doing oil changes and stuff, but it was kind of half and half. It was big enough and had enough room that you could do work out of it, but it also had the oil reels and the big oil recovery tank and all that. So the guy that was in that, I don't know, I didn't really like that guy a lot. He was kind of dumb, but he was done with being in the field and he wanted to go back to the shop and all that stuff. So he left, and I don't know what happened, but he left, so it left that truck open. And I had kind of expressed a little bit of interest, like, hey, I might want to go into that truck. And they were like, they were like, okay, maybe, like, we don't have the workload for that yet and all that stuff. Well, I did some undercarriage work on a dozer. I don't remember what size. It was a John Deere dozer, but I don't remember what size it was. And I misread the way you check the track tension. So you run the straight line, but I measured to the bottom of the track grouser, not the top of the track grouser. So the tracks were way too tight, and I didn't notice that. I didn't understand that, and I probably should have read it a little bit better. But then also I had the shop foreman look at it, and he's like, it is kind of confusing the way they explained it. But it's beside the point. So I had over-tightened these tracks, and the machine went out. Nobody noticed it. Nobody had noticed it, and the customer got the machine. It was like a rental company had the machine. It was a rental company's machine, and their mechanic was like, "It's making this terrible grinding noise. We're not sure what's going on." So I was like, so they didn't have anybody available. So she was like our service manager, I guess, but she was kind of the field service dispatcher too. She was like, "Go grab that 550 and grab some tools and go check it out." And it was probably like 45 minutes away. It wasn't like just right down the road. So I was like, okay. So I was like super scared, and like I go down there, and I realized that it was just grabbing the track guide. So I just loosened the tracks, and then it was fine. And at that point, they were like, "Well, put your stuff in the truck. You know, we have the workload, so take it." And I was always kind of hesitant to take a field job just because I'm like, I don't know enough. But you know what? You figure it out. So like if you're hesitant, just figure it out. Like to this day, I still don't know everything. I mean, you're never going to know everything. So there's times that to this day that I'm like, I don't really know how to do this, but I'll figure it out. So you just kind of figure it out as you go. So that's kind of the best way I say it, trial by fire. So just figure it out. I mean, and here's a good tip that I found. There's a guy on YouTube. He's a forklift mechanic. Can't remember. He does like reaction videos. I don't remember what his channel is. I'll link it if I remember. But he did a short one time, and he's like, it was a reaction to somebody else's video, and he's like, look, if the customer knew anything, they wouldn't have called you. So if you have absolutely no idea what you're doing, just act like you know what you're doing, because they have no idea anyway, or they wouldn't have called you. And that's true in most cases. I mean, there's some cases that they actually really do know what's going on. But if like a farmer or something has you out working on a machine and you're like kind of struggling through it and like not 100% sure what's going on, they have no idea because they called you in the first place. So just figure it out and go for it. So that's this week's episode of Thursday Thoughts. Like and share this video. If anybody wants to donate to the channel, that would be much appreciated. There's a PayPal link down below. We're on Instagram and TikTok, so check us out on Instagram and TikTok.